The fire took everything from me. First I saw it burn Mama, her eyes slowly melting from their sockets, and her mouth was agape with incinerated flesh, and her arm reached out, tried to save me. Only the roar of the flames kept her screams from reaching my ears. Just that sight alone was enough to traumatize me, but it was only the beginning. I'll never forget the way the floor collapsed. My body fell 3 floors through splintered rafters in heat, slamming against the ground with the force of a freight train, and then the debris smashing on top of my frail body. It wasn't any act of God that saved me. It was my own father. Moments earlier, he had somehow managed to drag my older brother from the blaze, and now he risked his life and limb to free myself and Mama. I'll never know how he found me in the scorched den, but somehow, with the strength of a dozen men, he lifted a beam off my frail body and told me to run. I hesitated, frightened of the inferno around me, and that I would lose him too, and then his voice became authoritative and loud. "Take care of your brother," he demanded. Tears welled up in my bruised eyes as I limped towards safety, my battered body barely crawling out as the house continued to fall in on itself. My brother and I clung to each other for hours as EMTs took us to be treated. We were so hot that our skin stuck together. As they managed to pry us apart, I remember seeing my bloodied and broken brother trembling in the bed next to me and realizing that the fire had completely scarred his eyes and most of his face. He was clinging to life with raspy breaths as our grandparents arrived, desperate to comfort us in this tragedy. The rest of that night was a blur. I remember hearing the nurses tell my grandfather that Jamie would be permanently blind. And that our parents were dead. I'm not sure if it was the shock from my injuries or that statement, but after hearing confirmation of it, my body went numb. I was exhausted from pain, both physically and emotionally, and all I could do was lay there and shake. My grandmother tried squeezing my hand, but she might as well have been holding a cold, stiff rail. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even sleep amid my trauma. The event so great that I was frozen in agony, staring at the flashing lights in the hospital. I wanted to do something, to cry, to scream. I had nothing left inside me, not even a whimper. The fire had taken that too. 3 days later, after treating our 3rd-degree burns and making sure we could become mobile again without need for assistance, the hospital released us to the care of our grandparents. They set up weekly visits for a therapist to help. Jamie adjusted to his disability and gave our guardian instructions on how we were able to readjust to everything, as though we could go back to the way things were before. Instead, when we arrived at our modest townhouse, Grandma added one more rule to the care that we would be given. "I've disposed of every mirror in the house, even that vanity your mother treasured, and there will be no more coming into the home. Not now. You needn't be living your lives feeling like freaks. You are my children, and I love you no matter what. This is disfigured," she told us. Her words were emotional and yet cold at the same time. I knew she was setting this in place for my benefit, to try and shield me from the scars that had likely twisted my eyes and mouth. So I said nothing, and I helped Jamie inside. Instead, I focused on my other worries, such as school and clothes. Grandma and Grandpa claimed that they would handle everything, and sure enough, they did. They arranged for our schooling to be online, our activity outside the house to be limited to less than a few hours a day, and at specific times. At first I thought this was out of embarrassment, to hide from prying eyes what the fire had done to us. Maybe that was part of it. But as the days and weeks passed, I adjusted to this new life. I began to wonder if perhaps there was more to it than that. Surely my grandparents didn't intend for these restrictions to stay in place forever. We were still children. We still needed to live our full life. And with no one else to turn to, we felt like prisoners. Worse than even the loss of our parents, truly. There was one time when Jamie and I became so desperate to see other people that we ran in the middle of the night to the closest building, a gas station down the road. The clerk seemed concerned when we burst into the aisles, crying and shaken just to get out of the house. It felt as free as being out of that defining blaze. But just like being snatched away then, the moment did not last. A phone call later, the police were there to escort us home, lecturing me about sneaking out at night with my blind brother and, more importantly, concerned over our well-being. They actually thought our grandparents were abusing us. It took some convincing to explain that the scars were from an accident, but ultimately it taught me a lesson. We had to stay prisoners, whether we like it or not. Still, even then, though I accepted our fate, I still wanted to purchase a mirror to see for myself what had happened to me. The reason I was now a monster. I didn't purchase one. Our resources of the house were limited to landlines and books. Instead, I waited until Sunday, when they went to church, and I fashioned one out of materials that I had gathered in the yard, bits of string, discarded glass. I could hardly make out anything, though, and of course, Jamie was oblivious to anything at all. I remember staring at him, the way his face was hardly stitched together. It reminded me of a half-finished Frankenstein monster. Anyone who had never seen him would likely have thought he was dead. Or beaten to a pulp. Was that how I looked too? Like the Walking Dead? Like I needed to be 6 feet under? I had to know. But the makeshift mirror only enticed my curiosity. I could see bits of my face, but not the whole thing. And even that infuriated Grandma. I'm not sure if it was because she found it in the trash, or Jamie told her, or when she did, she smashed it into little pieces. She told me that I was too full of doubt. She even equated my fear to a lack of love for God. You're a sinner. That's for sure. Drop to your knees and beg that you could still be saved, she told me. I was so frightened by the statement that I did as she told me, and she cackled. If you listen to me, you will never have to fear again. I promised I would. And this time, I meant it. See, I didn't want to burn in hell, for I thought of it as 10,000 times worse than that inferno I had survived. So I struggled, but I shook away the idea of mirrors, the temptation. Years passed by, and living without any knowledge of myself became like second nature for me. I believe I started to imagine that I never even had features at all, that I was amid a dream, bodiless, floating. My only solace was to write in this diary that Grandma bought for my 15th birthday. I'd use it to imagine worlds I could never visit. Forgot about the pain of reality. It was easier that way, especially as I saw Jamie struggle and become more and more isolated. He hardly left his room except to eat and use the toilet. He wasted away, always accusing me of not trying to get out of there. You have a chance. You can lead a normal life. You know, I've heard the neighbor boys talk to you sometimes. You aren't as bad off as me. They're just being kind, I told him repeatedly. But one day, he finally convinced me that I should go sneak into their house and see for myself if maybe I could be free. Our grandparents had taught us to stay indoors so much that the idea of leaving us alone no longer seemed a problem. We had become obedient without question. But inside our heartache, Jamie and I wanted more. And on that day, that desire changed everything. Tommy, the neighbor that had spoken with me, was asleep in his room when I tossed a few pebbles up to get his attention. He pushed open the frame and looked down at me, frowning as I begged him to let me in. A few moments later, I was finally able to get a good glimpse of myself in a mirror. Tommy gave me some privacy after I got in his room and told me that his closet had a reflective surface on the outside. I remember steeling myself and closing my eye, preparing myself for the ghastly visage that I was bound to see. Yet instead, when I stepped in front of the mirror, I saw absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. A few minor scars ran along my neck, shoulders, where the fire had harmed me, but my face was unblemished. My eyes sparkled with life, my skin as pale as the moon. I wasn't some disfigured freak. Something inside me snapped, a bubbling emotion of anger and hate. Why? Why had my grandparents locked me away then? Why had they told me that I was never to look at a reflective surface? They had abused me. I stared at my own face, hardly recognizing myself, and I realized what needed to be done. They deserve to pay, I said to myself. At that same moment, I heard them driving up and going into our house. They would know I was gone soon enough and hunt to lock me away again, I thought. I acted on impulse and I shot out of Tommy's room, hardly able to keep my fingers from clenching into fists. It felt like seeing the truth so clearly in those few minutes changed every fiber of my being. The feeling of numbing pain from the fire had returned, but this time it was a welcome emotion. It spurred me toward another choice that would change the course of my life forever. I stormed into Grandpa's garage, finding gallons of gasoline and matches, and without hesitation I grabbed them and I set about dousing the outside of the house with the fluid. Revenge clouded my judgment. An evil was festering inside my body. They were the ones that had taken everything from me, from Jamie. They were the ones that wanted us to never see the beautiful light of day. So in a single act of defiance, I wanted them to feel that same sort of suffering that we had. I lit a match, and I torched the house that had been our cage. It was like watching the sky light up. I remember standing there, lost in the reverie of my decisions, smiling. I heard their screams and I reveled in them. And then I heard the emergency services start towards the house and that brief moment of freedom was gone again. This time their efforts to save my family worked. I remember being pulled away by a firefighter as I tried desperately to keep the blaze going. They deserved to suffer. But despite my protests, the people that had taken my own life away from me for years managed to break free from the blaze. Paramedics nursed them back to health, and all I could do was sit and wait for judgment. I heard whispers from the conversation. It was like listening to my own execution. We tried so hard to keep this from happening. We thought it would be enough to take away the triggers, Grandma said, as she talked to a tall man in a dark suit and a tie. With the loss of your home, we need to realize your grandchild is sick and needs rehabilitation. Help you can't give her, the man said. Sick? What were they talking about? Grandpa was crying and looking at me sadly, and the man came to sit alongside me, and I froze. Was he here to take me away? Hello there. I was wondering if you could answer a few questions for me. I nodded slowly, almost robotically. All right, then. Can you tell me what happened here? I did. I explained everything that they had done to me and to Jamie, my heart racing as I angrily described the bonds they placed me in, an invisible prison of fear. And then I backtracked for a moment. Wait, where's Jamie? Did my brother, did he make it out of the fire? I screamed. I shot up to run and find him, but the man held me back. I need you to listen to me, please, he said. I was sobbing. I was trying to fight back tears. What had I done? Had I burned my brother in an act of rage? Have you ever told anyone else about Jamie? I gritted my teeth. What was he talking about? Had my grandparents tried to hide him too by denying his existence? Please, just for a moment. I need you to see something, the man said. Then he took out a small hand mirror from a nearby case and he passed it to me. "Tell me what you see." I grabbed it in frustration. Tired of the games, I needed to find my brother, and then when I stared at my reflection, I saw him. Jamie's reflection was the one that was staring back at me. The burns, the scars, the disfigured smile. What sort of trick was this? I tossed the mirror away, covering my eyes as the world seemed to go dark around me. I hardly could stay conscious. When I did regain my mind, I was in a hospital. The kind that no one wants to go to. The man was standing over me with some papers. "You can't keep me here! I need to find my brother!" I shouted. The man sighed and he turned to my sobbing grandparents. "The medicine's having no effect. The altar is still very real to them. I'm afraid for the time being we're going to have to keep your grandchild here," he said. The words sounded so foreign to me, and yet at the same time I understood them perfectly. Or some part of me did. I was Jamie? I am Jamie. They'll be provided the proper tools where we can monitor both personas, including a computer where they can write up their feelings. I kept quiet until they left and stumbled out of bed, looking at the items they allowed me to have from home. My diary, my treasured keepsakes, the mirror. I opened the diary and I read the entry from home. Half of them I didn't even remember. I skimmed the pages until I went back to the very beginning, to before the first blaze. My hands trembling as I learned the truth. It was a medical record stapled to the book. Age 16. Diagnosed with differential identity disorder. One unknown alter. Believes to be brother named Jamie. Current treatment in progress. Current triggers. Patient has exhibited extremely violent behavior as Jamie when seeing themselves in a mirror. Patient is a diagnosed pyrophiliac. Multiple cases of attempts to burn or harm others have been documented. Recommendations include keeping the altar subdued until further treatment can be explored. No known cause for tendencies. I had caused the fire. I was the tragedy that struck my family. I looked back at the mirror. I saw Jamie again. And I saw myself. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and I wanted to say thank you for watching tonight's video. And also, I feel like this is something that really needs to be said. I'm pretty sure all of you are hearing this far too many times from far too many places, but during the current COVID-19 crisis that's going on, make sure that you're practicing safe hygiene, wash your hands, don't touch your face, don't lick random strangers on the street. I know that there's a lot of memes going around about it, but the biggest note is that although it may not be deadly for everyone, keeping it contained reduces the risk of death to everyone. So, important. Also, a number of conventions are currently closing around the United States. If there's a convention near you that I was intending to appear at, if there's an announcement of any kind of closures, I'll be sure to let all of you know on Twitter and the community page, so make sure you're following me there to get any information about that. And also, if you look in the description down below, you're going to find a group of my friends that are artists that make their living at events and conventions such as this. So I know all of them would appreciate any kind of support that you could show, especially if you feel like you're missing out on some of their artwork from missing out at these cons. So take a look there, see if there's anything you like. I know a lot of them work on creepypasta stuff, horror movie stuff, and generally anime and comic books that at least I love, so I hope that you do as well. And a very special thank you to everybody on that Patreon, patreon.com/Mrcreepypasta, especially Ariel Torres, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, Asia, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, Nico, kaeo, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Don Meulmeester, Eliminator 86, SteampunkSinner, Kaleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Gabrielle Undefined, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Bobby Jean Torgan, Dr. Strawberry, The Wormhole, Barbara Macedo, and Vic. Thank you guys so much, and if anyone would like to join them on that list, head over to patreon.com/Mrcreepypasta. Here's hoping that you guys are loving the horror as much as I am. And sweet dreams.